Imagine watching your teenager make a terrible mistake, like a completely avoidable, night-ruining decision.
Ah, that's the worst feeling.
Right. And instead of stepping in to save them, you actively choose to do absolutely nothing. You just watch it happen.
Which goes against every single parental instinct.
Every instinct you have. Yet today, we are exploring why suppressing that hardwired urge to control others might actually be the ultimate key to reclaiming your own sanity. So, welcome to today's deep dive.
Glad to be here.
If you are a fellow learner looking for a practical, immediate way to just reduce the friction in your daily life without having to adopt some exhausting new morning routine, you are in the right place. We're examining excerpts from the Let Them Theory by bestselling author Mel Robbins.
That's a fantastic text.
It really is. And our mission today is to unpack how adopting a really simple two-word phrase can entirely change the way you interact with the chaotic world around you.
And the stakes here are fascinating because we're essentially battling our own biology. I mean, human beings have a profoundly hardwired innate need for control.
Oh, absolutely.
We try to dictate our time, our environment, and most exhaustingly, the behavior of the people around us. Psychologically speaking, attempting to manage others gives us this illusion of safety in a really unpredictable world.
Like if I can control you, I'm safe.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the reality is that trying to bend everyone else to our will is precisely what causes massive unnecessary stress. So today we're going to explore the neurological and philosophical mechanisms behind this.
Moving beyond just what the theory is.
Right, to uncover the evolutionary reasons why dropping our desperate need to control others is actually a potent strategy for preserving our own mental energy.
Which is huge. But to really grasp the utility of this new tool, we first have to understand the boundaries of our own willpower, right? We need to look at the limitations of self-motivation, which takes us back to a pretty harrowing period in the author's life.
Yeah, her baseline was incredibly tough.
It was. At 41 years old, Mel Robbins was facing a catastrophic baseline. She was $800,000 in debt.
Which is just a staggering number.
Unemployed, her husband's restaurant business was completely collapsing, and she was struggling with really intense anxiety. She was watching her peers succeed while she was paralyzed, like actively avoiding the mail to hide from bills.
Hitting the snooze button just to, avoid waking up to reality.
Exactly.
It's a textbook case of an avoidance spiral. When the external environment feels overwhelmingly threatening, the brain's natural defense mechanism is to just retreat.
Hide under the covers.
Literally, yes.
And her method for breaking that spiral was remarkably simple but effective. After watching a NASA rocket launch on television, she had this epiphany to bypass her own hesitation. She decided to count backward, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and literally launch herself out of bed before her brain could manufacture an excuse to stay there.
Right, the origin of the 5-second rule.
Yeah, the concept that essentially launched her entire career.
And from a cognitive behavioral standpoint, that makes perfect sense. Counting backward demands focus from the prefrontal cortex, which actively interrupts the brain's default mode network.
Where all the anxiety and procrastination loops happen.
Exactly. It's a highly effective way to hijack your own hesitation.
I see how it works mechanically, but okay, let's unpack this. Because reading about her continuing struggles made me think of a car engine.
Okay, a car engine. I'm listening.
The 5-second rule is like finally getting the engine in your car to operate flawlessly. You fix the starter, the spark plugs are firing, you blast out of the driveway.
Moving.
Right. But getting the car running completely fails to help you deal with the terrible drivers in the traffic jam surrounding you.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
Because if counting backward fixes your personal procrastination, why did she still feel so exhausted and anxious all the time? I mean, the car is running beautifully, but the ride is still totally miserable.
That analogy cuts straight to the core of the issue. It beautifully illustrates the critical divide between our internal agency and our external reality.
Right.
A tool like the 5-second rule is brilliant for internal battles. It forces you to go to the gym, to open that terrifying stack of mail, to confront your own inertia.
But you can't use it on other people.
Exactly. You cannot use personal self-discipline to force the cars in front of you to move out of the way. Internal motivation cannot stop a micromanaging boss from hovering over your desk.
Or stop family members from making passive-aggressive comments.
Right.
No matter how well your engine runs, you still collide with the brick wall of other people's free will.
Precisely. Trying to force other people to match our expectations is the equivalent of trying to reach into their car and steer the wheel for them.
Which is terrifying.
And an impossible, exhausting task.
Huh.
Realizing that self-improvement tools fail when applied to external chaos is the crucial bridge here. We require a completely different cognitive strategy for navigating uncontrollable variables.
Namely, other human beings.
Yes, managing yourself is a matter of discipline, but attempting to manage everyone else is just a recipe for chronic anxiety.
Which brings us to a highly chaotic, real-world scenario where the let them concept essentially crystallized.
The prom story.
The prom story. The setting is her son Oakley's high school prom. Now, her daughters had historically planned their proms with months of preparation.
As one does.
Right. But her teenage son has left everything to a frantic 48-hour scramble. They are hunting down a last-minute tuxedo, searching for specific sneakers, and he secures a date at the absolute final hour.
The stress levels are already through the roof.
Oh, peaking, and the tension really peaks over a corsage. The mother, acting out of a desire to enforce tradition and preparedness, I guess, orders an expensive corsage for the date.
Even after her son explicitly tells her the girl doesn't want it.
Yes.
The parent is projecting her own anxiety about societal expectations onto the teenager's event. She wants to ensure the pictures look flawless to satisfy her own standard.
Totally. So she forces the corsage onto the girl during the photos, only to realize the date had already made a custom one and was wearing it.
Just an agonizing moment of overstepping.
So awkward. But then the real crisis hits. A sudden, massive rainstorm. No umbrellas. 20 teenagers in very expensive formal wear, and in the middle of this deluge, the kids casually decide their dinner plan will be Amigos Taqueria.
Which is a fast food establishment roughly the size of a storage shed.
A shed with maybe 4 tables.
Yeah.
You have 20 soaking wet teenagers cramming into a tiny taco stand in their formal wear, so the parents immediately panic. Mel pulls out her phone and starts frantically calling nice restaurants, trying to secure a last-minute sit-down reservation for 20 people on a Saturday night.
An impossible task.
Completely.
Yeah.
And I have to pause the narrative here because I think a lot of people listening would side with the mother. I certainly felt the instinct to intervene.
It's a natural parental response.
Right. Watching kids about to ruin expensive clothes and potentially have a miserable, chaotic dinner isn't stepping in to secure a proper restaurant, just good parenting. At what point does letting them fail or letting them make a seemingly terrible logistical choice cross the line into neglect?
Well, that gray area is where the hardest parental and interpersonal work happens. Distinguishing between guiding someone and controlling them is incredibly difficult.
Yeah.
But consider the intervention from the author's older daughter, Kendall, in that very moment. She watches the frantic phone calls, grabs her mother's arm and says, "Mom, if Oakley and his friends want to go to a taco bar, let them."
And the mother immediately protests. She argues that their expensive sneakers will be ruined, to which the daughter just replies, "Let them get ruined."
Notice what is actually happening there. The daughter isn't advocating for neglect. She is pointing out autonomy. The teenagers made a choice that they were happy with.
Oh, right.
The crisis only existed in the mother's mind. And what's fascinating here is the physiological reaction that followed.
Yeah, this part blew my mind.
Upon hearing those words and deciding to drop the phone, the author describes a sudden physical softening in her body.
Like the tension just evaporated.
Exactly. And this tells us something vital about the mechanics of stress to the listener. The anxiety wasn't emanating from the taco stand or the rain. The anxiety was entirely manufactured by her own demand to manage an experience that did not belong to her.
So the exhaustion wasn't coming from the environment, it was coming from the exertion of trying to control it.
Yes. When we drop the heavy burden of responsibility for other people's outcomes, especially when those outcomes don't actually harm them but simply offend our preferences, our parasympathetic nervous system engages.
The fight or flight response deactivates.
Precisely. She handed them $40, watched them sprint into the rain, and realized they were having the time of their lives.
It shifts from a crisis to a comedy the moment you relinquish that illusion of control. But applying this to teenagers eating tacos is one thing. Applying it to our peers and our own deep-seated insecurities requires a lot more vulnerability.
It's much harder when it's your own social circle.
Exactly. There is a story shared here about social media that hits uncomfortably close to home. The author describes sitting on her couch, scrolling through her feed, and stopping on a photo of a friend. After reading the caption and swiping through the carousel, this brutal realization dawns on her.
All of her local friends went on a trip without her.
Yes. The women she considered her core circle in their small town went on an epic girls' weekend trip, and she wasn't invited.
That is the universal trigger for the fear of exclusion.
And she immediately defaults to what she calls full stalker mode.
Oh, we've all been there.
We know the mechanics of this, right? Pinching the screen to zoom in on the background of the photos, analyzing the body language of who is sitting next to whom.
Spiraling into acute feelings of rejection?
Total spiral. And the overwhelming instinct she experiences is the desperate need to text them. She wants to reach out, figure out what she did wrong, and somehow fix the dynamic so she can stop feeling this agonizing anxiety.
Because texting in that moment feels like an attempt to regain agency. It's a proactive movement against a very painful, passive feeling.
But I see a contradiction there. Here's where it gets really interesting. I think the urge to text those friends is remarkably similar to scratching a mosquito bite.
Okay, how so?
It provides this intense euphoric relief for about a millisecond while you're scratching it. But fundamentally, you are just tearing up your skin. You're introducing bacteria, causing inflammation, making the underlying wound infinitely worse.
That is a perfect analogy.
I wonder, though, to ask you, are we ever actually trying to mend the relationship when we send that frantic text? Or are we exclusively trying to soothe our own internal panic?
Psychological research points overwhelmingly to the latter. You are trying to soothe your own dysregulated nervous system.
Wow.
The urge to insert yourself into a situation where you were excluded actually stems from evolutionary biology. For early humans, tribal inclusion was not just a matter of social standing, it was a matter of physical survival.
Because if you're kicked out of the tribe,
Exclusion literally meant death by starvation or predation. So when you see that Instagram photo, your amygdala, which is the brain's threat detection center, doesn't differentiate between a missed vacation and a fatal banishment.
it just sounds the alarm.
It sounds a massive alarm.
So the panic is a survival mechanism, and the text message is a desperate attempt to prove we are still safe within the tribe.
It is the pursuit of an illusion of safety. We mistakenly believe that if we apologize or subtly guilt trip them or just assert our presence, we can manage their perception of us.
But we can't.
No. The tragic irony is that trying to manage a past event that you have absolutely zero power over only amplifies your internal alarm bells.
You're pouring emotional energy into a void,
Exactly. You cannot force them to want you there.
which is where the cognitive strategy comes into play. Sitting on that couch, instead of sending the destructive text, she utilized those two words. Let them go on the trip. Let them have inside jokes without me. Let them be closer to each other than they are to me.
And by repeating that phrase, you act as a cognitive circuit breaker. When you say let them, you engage your rational prefrontal cortex to override that panicked amygdala.
You're consciously acknowledging that their behavior is outside your jurisdiction.
Yes. It stops the obsessive cycle of trying to decode their motives, which finally gives your nervous system permission to stand down. You stop scratching the mosquito bite.
What fascinates me is how universally this circuit breaker resonated once she shared it. The concept didn't just stay in a book. It became a massive global phenomenon.
It really did.
The numbers cited in the source are staggering. A 60-second video explaining this theory hit 15 million views in its first 24 hours.
Unbelievable.
It rapidly climbed to 60 million views and spawned one of the most widely shared podcast deep dives in the world. But the detail that signals a true cultural nerve being struck is the physical permanence people assign to it. People started getting let them tattoos.
Right. Permanent ink.
There are grids of photos showing people's arms and wrists permanently inked with this phrase. Why does a simple coping mechanism for social media FOMO drive thousands of people to permanently alter their bodies?
Well, a viral video indicates entertainment, but permanent ink indicates a profound shift in core identity.
Yeah.
The reason it resonates so deeply is that let them is not actually a new self-help hack. What the author has done is distill centuries of complex foundational philosophy into a highly accessible two-word tool.
Oh, wow.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, when people get that phrase tattooed, they are, whether they realize it or not, permanently inking the core tenets of Stoicism onto their wrists.
I think when most people hear Stoicism, they imagine suppressing all emotion and just enduring misery with a blank face.
Right, the stiff upper lip.
Yeah. So how does an ancient philosophy map onto not texting your friends about a vacation?
That's a very common misconception about Stoicism.
Oh.
The actual foundational principle of Stoic philosophy, particularly the teachings of Epictetus, is the dichotomy of control.
Okay, what is that?
It is the practice of ruthlessly delineating between what is in your power, which is exclusively your own thoughts, beliefs, and actions, and what is entirely out of your power, which includes the weather, the economy, and the opinions and actions of everyone else.
I I see.
Epictetus taught that suffering arises entirely from confusing those two categories.
Mhm.
Let them is merely a modern translation of that ancient boundary.
So by saying let them, you're categorizing your behavior as not my department and returning your focus to the only thing you can operate yourself.
Exactly. And the philosophical roots extend further into the core of Buddhism and the psychological framework of radical acceptance.
Now, radical acceptance always sounds incredibly passive to me. Like if a coworker is actively undermining you or a friend is making a destructive life choice, doesn't accepting it mean you're just rolling over and letting them cause harm?
The word acceptance trips people up because we conflate it with
Oh,
approval.
that makes sense.
Radical acceptance does not mean you approve of the toxic coworker or the destructive friend. It posits that our psychological suffering does not stem directly from the painful events themselves, but from our continuous resistance
Mm.
to the reality of those events.
We suffer because we're fighting reality.
Yes, we expend immense energy demanding that reality be different than it currently is. We demand that the teenager be naturally organized or that the friends be more considerate. Radical acceptance is the active, conscious practice of dropping that futile resistance.
You acknowledge the reality of their behavior without fighting a mental war against it.
Exactly, which transitions seamlessly into detachment theory.
I was just going to say that.
Yeah, in psychology, detachment is about creating a structural mental gap between a stimulus and your response. When you're entangled with someone else's behavior, their actions immediately dictate your emotional state.
They do something frustrating, and your blood pressure instantly spikes.
Right. But by deploying the phrase, let them, you construct a buffer zone. You step into the role of an observer rather than a participant. You are refusing to let their unmanaged behavior hijack your biological responses.
It's like putting up a shield.
It is. Releasing the heavy, exhausting burden of managing other people's lives ultimately allows you to protect your most precious, finite resources, your time and your psychological energy.
It's brilliant because it takes dense academic theories of cognitive behavioral therapy and ancient philosophy and compresses them into a mental keystroke that anyone can use in the heat of the moment.
A very practical application.
We have traversed a wide landscape here today, moving from the paralysis of financial debt to the chaos of high school proms, the evolutionary biology of social exclusion, and the foundational wisdom of the Stoics. But synthesizing all of this material, the central thesis is clear. Let them is the antithesis of giving up.
It requires profound strength. I mean, it takes far more discipline to observe chaos without intervening than it does to reactively throw yourself into the middle of it.
It is not about being a pushover. It's the sobering realization that your jurisdiction begins and ends with your own mind.
Exactly.
The material actually teases the necessary second half of this equation, which is let me. Because once you stop siphoning all your cognitive energy into predicting and managing everyone else's behavior, you suddenly have a massive reserve of bandwidth available to empower your own life.
That is the ultimate return on investment. The text offers a compelling visual metaphor that perfectly encapsulates this interpersonal dynamic.
The seesaw.
Yes, picture a seesaw on a playground. The power dynamic between you and anyone else in your life operates precisely like this seesaw. When you attempt to force control, when you micromanage, when you yell, when you send a highly engineered passive-aggressive text, you are actively jumping onto their seesaw.
You are getting on the ride with them.
You are choosing to disrupt the balance, and in doing so, you tie your emotional stability entirely to the weight of their reaction.
Because if they push back hard, you go flying. If they ignore you, you crash to the ground. You are entirely at the mercy of their momentum.
That is the trap of control. But when you deploy the phrase, let them, you are making the conscious choice to step off the equipment entirely. You place both feet firmly on solid ground.
Let them keep playing.
Exactly. They can continue to ride the seesaw. They can go up. They can go down. They can throw a tantrum. They can make questionable choices. But you are no longer subjected to their emotional gravity. You remain grounded, acting as an independent observer, watching them play out their own game.
So what does this all mean? I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over, extending the logic of these sources just one step further. We've spent this entire discussion analyzing how to let other people be who they are so that you can salvage your own peace of mind.
Right.
But what happens if you take this exact same mechanism and turn it inward? What if you applied the let them theory to the various, often conflicting versions of yourself?
Applying detachment to your own internal states.
Right. Think about your default reaction when you feel suddenly anxious, unexpectedly exhausted, or deeply unmotivated. Our immediate conditioned instinct is to fight it.
We constantly battle ourselves.
We try to ruthlessly control our own emotions, criticizing ourselves for not being productive enough, strong enough, or happy enough in that exact moment. But what if, instead of waging a constant war inside your own head to force a different reality, you just let yourself feel it?
That is a profound shift.
Let yourself be profoundly tired today. Let yourself be a little messy or unorganized without treating it as a moral failure. Consider if the radical acceptance of the people around you must actually begin with the radical acceptance of yourself.
You have to step off your own seesaw, too.
Exactly. It's something to reflect on the next time you feel the overwhelming urge to fix everything in your immediate vicinity. Because it is highly possible that the most powerful tool you have to navigate the complexities of life isn't a complex strategy at all. It might just be two simple words. Let them.